Chinese President Xi Jinping urged global executives to defend trade and said globalization was unstoppable. He said multinational companies should shoulder important responsibility in maintaining the world's economic order. That's an order President Trump has been working to change with his tariff programs. Among the roughly 40 companies with executives in attendance, including Pfizer, Blackstone, Qualcomm, and Toyota, and Mercedes-Benz. I don't know how this message was received, but we're going to find out because data out this morning might give us a good reason, shows that China's economy is in fact weakening. Joining us now, China Beige Book Chief Economist Derek Scissors. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. That's not what we've been told lately. Haven't we been told that they're sort of getting their economic house in order, at least better than in some previous quarters?
Well, I think they're trying to. They're saying the right things. But the data from January and February, the official data, the improvement is just based on revising the base from the previous January and February down. So if you look at just the numbers they published back then and the numbers they publish now, the economy didn't get any better. They just decided to publish faster growth numbers and said, OK, well, the base has been changed. So either growth is slower than they say this year or was slower than they say last year. Our data say, at least in March, the economy got weaker. It's still growing, but it's growing more slowly. And the big problem is, as usual, on the consumption side, the worst sector that we track is retail, autos, food, luxury, all weaker than a month ago, all weaker than last year at this time. Deflation, constant question in China, worse in the retail sector. So, property is better than it was, which is not to say good. The supply side is always better than the demand side in China. But if you're focused on lifting the economy up through better consumption, that's not what you're seeing in March.
I mean, I thought it was interesting that, China, they're like appealing to the EU to like band together to resist Trump in the United States. That's like the fox, talking to all the hens and going, hey, like these other guys are, stick with us, guys. I mean, isn't the EU subject to the same inequitable trade practices coming out of China that the United States is? Is that going to work?
I hope not. I think you're exactly right. I always think of the EU as being sort of 5 to 10 years behind the U.S. in realizing Chinese practices. So that, well, that's right, maybe in a lot of things. The Germans are having their lunch eaten by the Chinese and still saying, well, we need to work with China, where the U.S. picked up on this a while ago. Yes, the Chinese, who have been trade predators for decades, are saying, man, those Americans, they're really mean on trade. Let's band together.
Meanies.
I don't think it's going to work, but Europe has fallen for this before, so why not try it if you're the Chinese?
Hey, Derek, the story Joe read right before about President Xi meeting with all of these multinational companies and saying that they shoulder a lot of the responsibility with maintaining free trade, and it's going to be on them to do that. I mean, we've already heard Chinese officials kind of beating up on Walmart saying, don't come here asking our suppliers to make up for the tariffs. You're going to have to eat that yourselves. There's a story in the Wall Street Journal today about President Trump meeting with the auto CEOs and telling them that he doesn't want to see them raising prices. The administration basically doesn't want those prices passed on to consumers because they don't want to see inflation. I just wonder how all of these companies are going to handle this when basically all the ways that they would normally save their margins are being cut off by nations on either side of this. Is that stuck? Does that mean they're going to be the ones who have to eat it, and as a result, their corporate profits are going to suffer?
I think look, some of these companies are stuck. You can't be told you can't pass on cost increases to your suppliers or your demanders, your buyers, because you're the only one left. I do think this is going to spur, while CEOs are in China saying, hey, we don't want instability, we don't want you angry at us, this is going to spur them to look around for another option. This is where you're getting all these people saying uncertainty, uncertainty, uncertainty. I don't know if it's uncertainty. I think everyone is hoping next week that we get tariffs that aren't applied to everyone in very punitive fashion, that you say that President Trump leaves them an option to say, I'm going to move more production outside of China. There's a place where I can go where I'm not going to be hit with tariffs, so I'm not caught in this trap that you were just talking about between Xi Jinping saying you can't pass on the costs and President Trump saying you can't pass on the costs. So if we leave a door open with tariffs, I think companies have an option. If not, then they're stuck.
Other countries
Right.
they could produce from and not get hit with those import duties.
Yep.
Yeah.
Derek, in general, and we got to go, but in general, do you think that that the EU has no preference about who they align with? I mean, they're talking a lot of smack about the United States right now and what's happening, and they don't need us and they don't like us. They're not going to visit here anymore. Could they? Do they have the same view of China that we have in the United States of fearing China's intentions about global domination? Do they care about that? Or, I mean, would they really? Doesn't matter who they throw their lot in with, whether it's just who's ever given them the better economic deal at the moment? Is there any ideological problems with, maybe thrown in your lot with a communist country? Or are they close enough themselves?
Look, I think there are ideological problems. The Europeans don't like the Chinese on human rights or the environment. But remember, Europe is not. Yeah, Europe is not threatened by China the way East Asia, our East Asian allies are, and the way we might be. They're not going to go to war with China. So I think that opens the door to economic cooperation that we might think, what are you doing? Why are you aligning with the Chinese? They're just not as worried about a conflict with China. And it's a mistake for not only ideological reasons, but as we discussed, the Chinese economy is weakening. You're putting your chips in with a weakening country.